Unspoken Issues.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Unspoken Issues podcast, and we are returning to form. That's right. Chris Armstrong is here. I got the opportunity to come up with something this time. It was right around Halloween, and I was like, what is it that we could do that, throw a poll out there that would feel somewhat of the holiday. Okay, Halloween, it's spooky time, it's creepy, it's spooky, it's altogether ooky out there. And I thought to myself, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, battle of the adaptations. Comic book adaptations in the 1990s of a Friday the 13th book, Nightmare on Elm Street book, and a adaptation of something that is in the Evil Dead universe. And that I landed on was Army of Darkness. Those three properties are what I was shooting for. Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. But again, battle of the adaptations of the movie. So Chris Armstrong, what'd you think of that? Did you think it was a good idea?
Yeah, very cool idea. If it wasn't for the fact that it was released in the 2000s, just doing Freddy versus Jason versus Ash would have been cool because that's a really cool book. But I think this is the Army of Darkness adaptation is the only Evil Dead comics from the 90s that I'm aware of. So
okay.
I think there are several other Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street property comics from the 80s and 90s, but
the poll results went like this. So I had the poll out there on our Facebook page, Unspoken Issues Podcast. Check that out on the Facebook page. It was Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare from Innovation, 1991. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday from Topps Comics, 1993. And then Army of Darkness from Dark Horse, 1992. And the clear winner by quite a margin was Army of Darkness. It doesn't surprise me. If you
People
look at yes, they do. Yes, they do. They love old Ashley J. Williams, right? Is that his last name?
I think that's right.
Yeah, all right. I took that one right off the top of my head. So here's how it broke down. Let me do this. Facebook wise, Freddy's Dead, which got almost zero love. We got 10 votes total on Facebook. So 10% of 10 votes would be 1, right? So Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare got 1 vote. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday got 3, and then 6 out of the 10 was Army of Darkness. Now, over on Twitter, we got a little bit more interaction there with a total of 30 votes. Freddy's Dead, once again, the clear loser, man. Have you ever read any Innovation comics?
No, I have not. I've heard of the publishing, but I've never read any of their books, I don't think.
Yeah, they're not well received. I guess that's probably the best way that I could put it. They had a lot of licenses. Specifically, I know for a fact that Mark and I talked about Lost in Space on the Source Material podcast, and Innovation had that license. But my goodness, you talk about some risque stuff in a Lost in Space book.
Was it based on the TV show or the movie from the 90s?
No, it was definitely based on the TV show.
Okay.
This was early 90s. You're thinking of that late 90s one with Matt LeBlanc?
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies, by the way. A lot of people hate it. I like it.
I have never seen it. To me, it's best known as the movie that finally beat Titanic at the box office, ending its months-long run as the #1 movie every weekend.
One of the first few DVDs that I owned was of Lost in Space. It was actually pretty decent. But anyway, we did I think 4 issues of it. I can't remember, but there was some...
Was that in conjunction with the Netflix show coming out, I guess?
Yeah, I think Mark probably synergized it with that. Yeah. Just to see.
I haven't watched that yet, but it looks cool. I'd like to watch
I've seen the first 3 or 4 episodes, but I stopped for some reason. It still looks really good. They also did a Quantum Leap comic, which I really want to read, but from what I heard, it's not good. So I don't know why Innovation got such a bad rap, but they had some licenses at the time. But anyway, clearly either people didn't like the movie Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which I've heard is not great either. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts on the movie Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare? You got any?
My thoughts are I watched it once and all I remember about it is that I didn't like it. So
okay. All right.
I don't really have any, I don't even remember what it's about. They're all about Freddy killing teenagers, but I don't really remember specifics about it.
I'm all caught up on small screeners / because movies. And
cool.
So I know you guys were touching on the Nightmare, looked at the original and looked at the remake. Is that how that you guys were doing that?
Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about the franchise, but not a ton. Because I mean,
you didn't go into each movie.
No.
Okay, because I do not remember you guys talking about this one. Freddy's Dead, and I was like, man, I can't remember if you guys covered it or not. But okay,
I
good.
think AJ went into more detail, but my position was basically outside of 1 and 3, I've only seen the others basically once, and I don't really like any of the others that much.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, over on Twitter, so that was 10% of the vote yet again out of 30 votes. So that's 3 votes. And then Jason Goes to Hell, again, coming in second here. This got 33.3 of the 30 votes that are out there. So very close again to 30% on our Facebook poll. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I don't know if I've ever watched it.
Yeah, I don't really like it. It has its fans, but yeah, it's just kind of a weird movie. Like, it opens very cool with like maybe a 10 or 15 minute sequence, maybe not even that long, of a girl at the camp by herself. She gets stalked by Jason. He chases her down, and she's leading him into a trap.
Yes.
And then these cops show up, or maybe feds or whatever, and they blow him away and literally like explode Jason's head.
Right, dude. I remember I was actually reading the comic because this was before the poll was over. Yeah. I jumped into Jason Goes to Hell, but I remember reading like the first few pages of this because I'd never watched the movie. I was like, everybody knows about Jason now. Like the FBI is here. They throw I remember there's a panel where a rocket is like coming down to hit Jason. And yes, he gets exploded pretty badly in that comic. It's pretty boring.
The movie basically from that point I'll just oversimplify it. Jason works more like a virus where like, I think the first person to get infected is the coroner that's like examining his body. And then he becomes Jason sort of for a while. And then it just kind of transfers to different people as the movie goes on. I didn't like it. It's pretty weird. Props to them for doing something different, I guess. But
Okay. Then we have Army of Darkness. This is the third installment.
Hail the King, baby.
Oh my goodness. Third installment of the Evil Dead franchise. Picking right up where Evil Dead 2 left off. Let me give my personal experience with the movies, and bear with me. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about Army of Darkness and Ash or anything like that, but the movie came out in 92 as well, right?
I must have if the book was out that year. I thought it was 93, but if the book came out in 92, I guess that's when the movie came out.
Let's look. Oh, you know what? Release date's February 19th, 1993.
Oh, okay.
There's a film festival, and it was released on October 9th of 1992.
So it was at a film festival, I guess.
Right. And then got a wide release in the United States, February 19th of 1993. Okay. Interesting then, we've got a book that was on shelves. Now I got to look up the adaptation to see when this dropped. Could you imagine?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a huge surprise just because I know novelizations used to come out before the movies a lot of times.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Even up to recent, I think even, they don't do novelizations like they used to. But one of the big movies, I don't think it was a Star Wars movie, but there was a big blockbuster in the last 5 years that released the novel a couple of weeks before the movie came out. Maybe it coincided with the international release of the movie or something like that.
Okay.
It hadn't been out. It had been released in America when the book had come out. So it's not totally unheard of, but it is kind of unusual, I think. Gotcha.
So listen to this release date schedule for these 3 issues of Army of Darkness from Dark Horse. November of 92, issue 1. Mm-hmm. December of 92, issue 2. October of 93 is issue 3. That is weird. Huge. That's a huge gap of time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you on Mike's Amazing World?
No, this is evildead.fandom.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they definitely restate it in the paragraphs. It was released by Dark Horse Comics from November of 92 to October of 93. Let's just look and see if they even talk about some of the...
Yeah, I'm just curious why it was such a long delay.
Same here. Do you not want to give away the movie? Because you don't really give away the movie.
Yeah,
in
especially,
the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do not say why. But yeah, man, that is a huge, almost a year. Mm. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to why they did that. I'm sure they had their reasons, but that's got to be something along the lines of I
Maybe
mean, it could
just the art was taking, a long time or something like that.
that could be. That's 1 month shy of a year since the first issue had dropped. Okay, yeah. Back to what I was talking about. So I was trying to figure out where this all started was when did this comic book drop and when did the movie drop? I remember watching the trailers for this movie. I knew about Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2, but they're calling this Army of Darkness, and I had never watched the first two Evil Deads because I'm a pansy, and that kind of stuff scared me, especially as a kid. I remember the cover of Evil Dead 2 and just going, nope, I'm never going to pick that up at the mom and pop video store. Never going to rent it, never going to watch it. So I didn't have any idea that these two things were related. So Army of Darkness drops. I don't go watch it in the theaters, but I immediately rent it on VHS as soon as it hits. You get the whole intro as to what's going on. And I'm like, wow, man, we're really like jumping into this. What a crazy backstory.
So when you saw the prologue, did you realize that was part of the Evil Dead movies? Or
not? I don't think I did at that time. I really don't think I did. I think I had to figure that out on my own somehow. The thing is I don't know how I would have come about that information unless somebody told me. We're talking 92. I didn't have ease of access to the internet. The internet's out there, but I don't have ease of access to it. So I have no idea how I found out about it. But at some point I realized that, holy crap, there's two of these that happened before this. So I made it a mission to go and watch the first two after I'd watched the third one. Really loved the third one, by the way. Loved Army of Darkness. I loved everything that happened in it. I loved how funny it was, along with, the gore and just Sam Raimi, which, at the time I didn't know who Sam Raimi was.
Yeah.
But man, is that a signature film style. Wow. Yeah, we went and watched Doctor Strange, and I'm going there with the kids, and I told Caleb, my oldest boy, I said, I want you to pay attention to how this movie is. And I said, when we go home here in about a week, we're going to watch Army of Darkness. And I want you to understand that he is probably one. And I know that there's plenty of filmmakers and other directors out there that have their own kind of signature style. But Sam Raimi's is like so obvious.
Yeah.
Like a Sam Raimi movie. Just if you didn't know who did Army of Darkness, didn't know who did Doctor Strange, you're going to be able to see there are parallels as to what's,
he did the original Spider-Man trilogy from the 2000s. And the best example of Raimi-esque style in the Spider-Man trilogy is in part 2, the Dr. Octopus surgery scene,
surgery,
which is like a horror movie, basically.
Yes, dude.
So wild. Really, and there's a little chainsaw like sound effects in there.
Right. So anyway, I go back and watch the first two. I think at this point in time, I've got my own VCR. I've got my own console TV in my room sitting on the floor. It's huge. And I bring some buddies over and we sit down and we watch the first two. And wow, was that a different tone than the third one.
Yeah.
Jeez. Criminy, man. I remember coming out, after watching those, and which one is it where the girl gets her legs spread and the vine gets shoved up her?
First one.
Is that the first one? Tell me if this is happening in the second one. When they're in the cabin, they're standing above the trap door, and the lady grabs like a pencil. And
that's also in the first one.
Is that in the first one? Okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna have to.
The stab in the ankle.
Yes, dude. And she's like, "Oh my gosh!" I remember. So again, something that has stuck with me to this day. What happens in the second one then? Like, are they still? They go back out to the cabin or something?
Well, the second one, it's kind of debated whether the second one is a remake or a sequel. Because it kind of plays more like a remake, only there's only Ash and his girlfriend instead of his other friends.
Okay.
And it kind of quickly goes through him and his girlfriend going and him having a killer and stuff. That happens pretty quickly in Evil Dead 2. And then he's just by himself for a while till some other people show up. So I don't think you're supposed to think about it too much. I think as far as whether they're sequels or because it seemed like in the second one, Raimi had a little more money. He wanted another stab at that first one, but he made it a lot more zany. It's more like a comedy, really, like a horror comedy, whereas the first one is kind of a serious, for the most part, horror movie.
Maybe that's what I am getting it confused with. Like I thought
one has like the witch in the cellar that comes up and attacks him. It's got the trees coming to life at the end.
Does this have the deer on the wall?
Yes.
The deer head on the wall? Okay.
Yeah, and it's the first time he gets it's when he cuts his hand off and the hand attacks him and he gets the chainsaw hand and everything in the second one.
It's been so long since I've seen that second one. Correct me if I'm wrong. What's the VHS cover look like for the second one?
The standard cover that I always remember is just the skull with the eyeballs in
Okay.
it.
Yes. And it's kind of looking at you out of the kind of sideways. Okay. All right. Yeah. That is probably like nope. Jesse Starcher's not going to be getting that. Okay. All right. So let me step back. Give me your history about your Army of Darkness / Evil Dead history.
Well, my first exposure to Army of Darkness is, I think, for a lot of people my age, which I would have been just about to turn 13 when it came out, if it was early 93. So my first exposure was the ads in all the comics, because there are a lot of full page ads and comics of just the poster of Army of Darkness, basically. And I didn't really care about watching it. I remember I had a friend who wanted to see it, and I think him and his older brother knew about the whole series, but I didn't realize it was part of a series till much later. So I didn't see it when I was a kid. I think it was probably like my junior or senior year of high school. I was probably like 98, around there.
Okay.
And I just, for whatever reason, I guess I was starting to get into horror movies, and I was trying to watch a lot of like the classic horror movies and stuff. And that's when I sort of learned that Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness were all part of the same series. I got really excited about watching them and I don't remember specifically why. I know Raimi had not been announced as the Spider-Man director yet, so I didn't really care about that. I think I was just excited to watch these highly regarded horror movies or whatever. So we had a Hollywood Video in our town. We didn't have a Blockbuster even at the time. So I'm going to rent all three of them because I knew I'd seen them there before. And I show up and they only have Army of Darkness in stock. The other two are rented out. So I can't wait. I go ahead and rent Army of Darkness.
Oh, wow. Wow. You're like, okay, so you knew this.
I think I knew that they were all kind of like, you could watch them independently and it didn't really matter that much.
Right.
So I watched that one, really liked it. Went back a few days later. They only had Evil Dead 2, and they didn't have the first one. So I rented the second one. So I ended up watching them in reverse order. Eventually, I got to all of them. But yeah, I watched them in reverse order. So Army of Darkness was the first one I watched. And I loved it. Loved Bruce Campbell in it. Became a big fan of him. I want to say early 2000s when they announced Raimi was the one doing Spider-Man, I was just like over the moon. Like, this guy's going to do the Spider-Man movies? This is amazing. This could be really great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always loved the Evil Dead movies. But yeah, I didn't see them until I was late in my teenage years. And I watch them pretty regularly still. I watched all three of them earlier in the summer because there's a Blank Check podcast. I don't know if you ever listened to it. It's a movie podcast. And they were covering Sam Raimi's filmography.
Oh, yeah.
So I just started at the beginning and watched all of Raimi's movies this summer, even a few that I had never seen before. So I finally actually saw, everything of his that I'd never seen.
Do you have a favorite Raimi movie?
It's hard to. I mean, it's definitely Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, that's probably. I've not watched as many as you have, probably, but I would say Spider-Man 2 is going to be on top of a lot of people's lists.
Yeah, like I'm predisposed to like that anyway because it's a comic book thing.
Right.
So if you kind of take the Spider-Man movies out of it, Evil Dead 2 is probably my favorite. It's my favorite of that trilogy for sure. But A Simple Plan is also really good. Have you ever seen A Simple Plan? You
had mentioned it, I think, either you or AJ had mentioned it on the podcast.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on one of those episodes.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Coen Brothers crime movie. It's really, really good. So I definitely recommend that one too.
Okay. All right. I like it. Army of Darkness ran away with this. Unspoken Issues podcast there, the podcast Facebook page, 60% of the vote. So that's 6 out of 10. And then over on our Twitter, 56.7% of the vote there, very close to Facebook as well. So you're talking Army of Darkness is well received. The one thing that I wanted to kind of get into with this whole poll was just to see how far the adaptation was going to kind of go from the movie itself. Mm-hmm. I have an adaptation of Superman 4, and it is probably one of the worst adaptations I've ever read of a movie. That put me on a path at one point to be like, oh man, I've got to start looking at these adaptations because some of them are just wildly different from the movie. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if that's what we would get with what we have. If the other two would have won, I would have had to have put my big boy pants on and watched A Nightmare on Elm Street because I've never watched that one, and I've never watched Jason Goes to Hell, but this one I did, and I'm glad it won out. Yeah, going through this, let's see. I'm trying to take notes of what the differences are. You're going to know better than me on some of these things. I know you got your notes here. If you were to sum up what happens in Army of Darkness, do you think you could do that, Chris, to our listeners and let them know kind of what happens to Ash, and tell them what happens in Army of Darkness?
So our hero, Ashley J. Williams, after the events of Evil Dead 2, has found himself transported to medieval times, where he is quickly taken captive by some soldiers. They try and execute him. He gets out of that. And the wise man of this kingdom believes that Ash is the chosen one who will lead their land out of the cover of darkness that has taken over them of late. So they send Ashley to retrieve a book that is supposed to have some spells in it that can A, send Ash back to his own time, and B, save this kingdom from the darkness that's overtaken their land. And it's the Necronomicon, which is the same book that sent Ash back in time from the previous movie. He gets the book, screws up in the process, and unleashes even more evil. And then he has to lead these rabble of soldiers into an epic battle with Deadites and skeleton soldiers and demons before eventually overcoming the odds. And okay, so in the movie, yeah, the wise man sends Ash back to his own time. He's back working at S-Mart, his 9-to-5 job. And as the credits are about to roll, he's confronted by another Deadite and takes care of business, gives a pretty lady in the store a kiss, and the credits roll there. It's such a fun movie. Yeah.
It really is. And Ash is just, he's an arrogant
asshole.
Right, of a hero. And
what did your son think of it when he finally watched Army of Darkness? I didn't ask.
Oh, dude, it really starts to pick up when they throw Ash down into the pit.
Mm-hmm.
And he's facing off with whatever's down there. He's glued to the set at that point. Caleb's like, oh, Ash just running off of the mouth when he comes back up. Caleb's like, this is going to be a funny movie, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, buddy, this is going to be a good one. You're going to really enjoy this. So yeah, he liked watching it. With kids nowadays, it's really kind of tough to sit them down in front of a 2-hour thing.
Yeah.
And them be enthralled or them be entertained with what's happening on the screen and not wanting to do something else. It's tough to do that.
Well, that's one of the good things about, especially the early Raimi movies. There's shit happening constantly.
Yeah.
It moves quick. And it's only, this one's only, I was surprised, it's only like an hour and 20 minutes.
Right, dude, it's under the 90-minute threshold.
Yeah, I think the director's cut may be a little longer. I'm not certain, but yeah, this cut's on the theatrical cut's only 90 or 80 minutes. We need more movies like that.
Right, dude. If you can get right to it, and that's one thing that you're right. This movie has no problem putting you right into the action and keeping it going. Anyway, Ash as a hero, though, I think is what's appealing about this movie to me, because even though he's an arrogant jerk, it's just so funny to watch him react because he's got this attitude and
constantly belittling all the villagers of this time.
Right. Okay, so there you go. There's Army of Darkness, the movie. The creative team of this Army of Darkness movie adaptation. So it's based off of the screenplay by Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi, brothers. I don't know anything about
Ivan Raimi is Sam's brother, yeah.
Okay. And then it says Renaissance Pictures. Adapted from the original screenplay and illustrated by John Bolton. And when we say illustrated, according to what I was seeing here, he's pencils, he's colors. Yeah. He does the whole shebang.
It seems like they just gave him the script and he just, there's not, like a lot of times when they do adaptations, even if they're using the movie's screenplay or whatever, there will be a writer who adapts it. But this seems to be just like they gave him the script and said, hey, paint it and we'll publish it.
Right. Lettered by Pat Brousseau. There you go. There's our creative team. Now, my first issue notes here, there's a couple interesting things that I picked up on in the first issue. Ash has an engineering degree, apparently, which is funny because the bro used medieval tech to build a functioning cyborg hand. But the guy works at S-Mart. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at least because they don't mention in the movie that he has an engineering degree. It's just like, oh, this guy can make all this stuff with his textbooks that he's got in the trunk of his car, I guess.
Yeah.
The absurdity is part of the fun, I think.
I agree. As I'm going through the first issue, I mean, it's feeling very much like the movie to me. Very much the same dialogue. We aren't getting anything that kind of strays from a totally different Ash here at all. This is the Ash Williams Bruce Campbell portrayed.
Yeah. And the dialogue is mostly just straight from the movie for the most part.
Now, one of the things I think they really set off here in the first issue, John Bolton can draw some monsters, man.
Yeah.
Wow. The whole pit scene, that pit scene that happens in the first part of the movie, clearly that's going to look a lot different because the artist here can take so many liberties and make it look so much more gnarly.
Yeah, he's doing more like a almost a Frank Frazetta style, or something you'd see in a Conan Conan the Barbarian book from the magazine from the 70s.
Right. Yeah, very much. I mean, how would you describe this art? Like, they say pencils and colors, but I mean, I feel like there's paint going on here.
I assumed it was painted. It's kind of a photorealistic art style, which sometimes I don't like. I do like this a lot, though. This seems like a cross between like Alex Ross and Simon Bisley.
I agree. It's got that dark, like, griminess to it, and I think that's because of the paints themselves. But yeah, I will tell you right now, I didn't look this up, but this guy is very talented.
I recognize his name. I looked at his bibliography, and I don't think I'd read anything that he'd done. I'd seen some covers and stuff, I guess, that he had done, but this is the first book I've read of his, I think.
Okay. Well, I will say that, in my opinion, what we get in here is just supreme talent. It looks really good. And if he's just taking a script and putting it to paper, that's not easy. Yeah. I mean, you've got to try and get across the action. You've got to try and get across. And there's probably some key moments that are going to be easy to probably come up with in your head that need to be shown in the comic, but damn.
I wonder if he had seen the movie, or at least like maybe seen early cuts, because there's some of these panels look like they're just he just directly painted the scene from the movie, like just certain images, mostly facial expressions and stuff. It's weird because like in Beth David's character, the female lead, and Bruce Campbell, they look like themselves pretty much in the book.
Yes, they do.
And you look at the wise man, who was played in the movie by Mr. Pitt from Seinfeld, one of Elaine's bosses. But in the book, he's just like this crackly old man with like huge crevices in his face from all the wrinkles and stuff. Like he looks like a character from D&D or something.
Yeah, he does. Man, Bolton does some faces too. Like Ash's face at the beginning of this book, where he's getting sucked into the portal. I mean, some great expressions on some of the Ash faces here. And that's kind of all I had for issue 1.
I was going to point out a couple of like smaller differences from the movie.
Okay.
In the first issue here, like the scene in the pit. In the movie, there are only 2 deadites that Ash fights, but in the book, I mean, it looks like there are like 10 or 12. Maybe there's a bunch of them.
Right.
In the movie, obviously smaller budget. They just did a couple, and then he got out. And then the scene with the witch that he fights when he's being fed the grapes and everything. There's that big thing where she's pushing the columns over and they kind of domino.
Yes.
That's not in the movie at all.
That's That's one thing that I had written down as a question. Like, did that happen? Because I could not remember that happening at all in the movie. It's not,
and I wonder if it's in the script and they just didn't have the budget for it, or if it's just something that Bolton thought would be cool and threw it in there.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I've got for the first issue, and I really like that final image. You see, I'm reading it out of this omnibus, so I'm not sure, but I assume the last page of issue 1 is Ash riding off on the horse.
Last page of issue 1, from what I can see, is actually just him and his lady friend.
Oh, okay.
Standing in front of the moon, looking off into the distance.
So that's the first issue, first page of the next issue that I'm thinking of. Okay.
Yeah. And then our second issue, I'm trying to think of where you're talking about there, because that does, it's not too long after that. Yeah. The very first page is him on the horse riding away from the castle.
Gotcha.
So that's our second issue.
Horse.
I know, dude. This might be one of my favorite parts of this movie, is when he makes his way to the windmill.
Mm-hmm.
And the only note that I have for issue 2 is, man, do I love the Three Stooges fight between. I think that might happen in the graveyard or at least when all the
the skeletons,
all the skeletons are coming up, poking people in the eyes, and he's like sitting there doing that. But we get some goofiness between Ash, and he calls them the he-me's. HE-ME, the he-me's that he has to fight, which is hilarious. To describe this to the people out there, if you've never watched this movie, Ash makes his way to this windmill, and inside the windmill, he's trying to find cover for the night. But what ends up happening is the evil, I guess, that has followed him here. I assume
that's it's what it's often referred to.
Is that what it's called?
First two movies, at least in the first two. I don't know if they really use that. I mean, and that's never said in the movies. It's just what people like fans call it, I think.
Yeah, it's followed him in here, and it's giving him a hard time. By at one point, I think Ash runs into a mirror, breaks this mirror apart. There's a bunch of little reflections of him, and these things come out of these reflections, and they're tiny little versions of Ash. Mm-hmm. And they basically decide to try to do some Gulliver's Travels type stuff where they poke him in the butt with a fork, and then they tie him down, and then they jump into his mouth, and it's just a big bunch of comedic stuff going on here where they're trying to kill this guy. And then the second version of Ash grows out of himself.
Yeah, well, the he-me's are able to force him to swallow one of them.
That's right. Right.
And so eventually it kind of starts to grow out of Ash.
Again, very grotesque, very nasty, and ends up being like this evil version of Ash who they get into a fight. One of they're both trying to kill each other, and it ends up being Ash on the winning end, at least you think, because he decapitates this guy who's still, of course, this evil dude who's still alive, but he decapitates him, throws him in different bags, and then buries him, thinking then that's the end of that. But and then this is where he finds the Necronomicon in this issue. I mean, this is the exact same sequence that happens in the movie, isn't it? So
pretty much, yeah.
There's not much of a difference here. He gets sucked into one of the fake Necronomicons, comes out of there, and then ends up finding the other one, gets his hand bit, throws it in the air, flies back, hits him in the back of the head. So all very, very much reminiscent or how the movie was portrayed.
The only thing I really had for issue 2 was because I like I said, I rewatched it this summer, but then I watched it again yesterday.
Good. I'm glad you did. You said you were thinking about doing it. I wondered if you did. Okay.
Well, I had ordered. I placed an order from Scream Factory. They did a 50% off sale in October, and so one of the Blu-rays I got was the Army of Darkness, because I've only seen it on VHS. Then I've had a couple of different DVDs of this movie over the years, and they always are just like the quality is awful, especially the director's cuts. Yeah, especially the director's cut, which has I guess just some of the scenes are so dark it's hard to tell what's going on. Just really bad quality, picture quality. Huh. But this Blu-ray looks fantastic. So this is the first time maybe I've ever seen it in high quality, picture and everything. So that was cool. But I noticed as I was watching it and I was kind of flipping through the issue, the everything pretty much takes place the same in the issue as in the movie. It's a little out of sequence, like they kind of the movie and the book, the sequence of events a little bit different, but other than that, pretty much the same stuff happens. Like I said, the director's cut, which has a much more of a downer ending which is what's in this book. We'll get to that at the end. There's also a different line in the movie as what's in the director's cut, where he shoots Evil Ash in the face, and he says, I think he says, "Good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun," after he shoots him. And in the movie, in the director's cut, he has a different line that's not as good. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Let me tell you, I actually took this note off of one of the comments from this issue. Now, it might line up with what you were saying. I don't know. It says, this is based on the screenplay, not the movie, yet the line, "Good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun," is present here when the original line was, "I ain't that good."
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's from that's in the director's cut, yeah.
Okay. Very subtle differences. So it's not I guess so far what we can say is not a whole lot of the vision was sacrificed from the screenplay to the movie.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that kind of suck about comic adaptations a lot of times is if you get basically the same story and you get mediocre or subpar art, that really, it's why am I bothering? But with this, like, you get like the perfect artist basically for this story. The only issue I really have as far as that is some of the dialogue boxes and stuff, like the captions and text boxes. Sometimes it's hard to tell, like, sometimes I'm reading them out of order because they're not laid out perfectly.
Right, where they're at, yeah.
That's the only, complaint I really have.
Why do you think this is so sought after? I know you said that, I mean...
I assume it's because of it had a low print run, maybe. Even though that it came out at a time when comics were kind of booming, it was Dark Horse, not Marvel or DC or Image. Right. So they probably weren't producing nearly as many books as those companies. And it was an adaptation for a movie that probably wasn't expected to be a huge hit. I don't think it was expected to be a bomb, although I think it kind of was a disappointment.
Right.
But I don't think it was expected to be a huge hit. And then, so on top of that, I think they probably just didn't produce that many, and maybe there aren't that many around to
gotcha
these days.
Rarity.
And it's a cult classic like property, so
all right, well, issue 3. So yeah, there are a couple of these things that I noticed in this that were a little bit different from what I remember. I don't recall Ash going and getting Henry or King Henry or whoever he was.
Yeah,
they just show up, don't they, in the movie?
Correct. There may even be like a drop line in there about like somebody going to like send someone to find Eric's men or something like that. I don't really remember, but yeah, in the movie, Ash definitely does not do it. But in the deleted scenes that I had actually never seen before, but they're on the Scream Factory disc I've got, the 2 deleted scenes that are represented in this book, one of them is Ash going to recruit Eric the Red and his men.
Okay.
And then there's also a scene where I forgot to cover it from issue 2 in the movie when he's in the windmill and he runs at the mirror and it shatters, and that's where the Hemis come from. Mm-hmm. That all takes place in the windmill. But in the movie, there's an extended sequence that's very similar to like sequences from Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, where Ash goes outside and he spends a few minutes kind of creeping around, hearing weird noises, played mostly in silence,
right,
outside of like the noises and stuff, the creepy noises and stuff. And then he finds his horse, and then he turns around and looks in the windmill from outside and sees the mirror, which is how it's represented in the comic. He's outside and he sees the mirror and then runs inside and smashes into it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was all cut out of the actual movie, but it's in the comic. But yeah, the Eric visiting Eric and recruiting them was also in the deleted scenes, but not in the actual movie. Yeah. Maybe the best illustration in the entire book is the woman whose name I can't recall. Sheila, is that her name? But when she gets grabbed by the winged deadite and pulled into the air, and it's basically got like a snake's body, and it's wrapped around her and pulls her up into the air. It's like a 1-page splash. That's probably my favorite panel from the entire series. Really, it's very cool. Yeah,
very much like you said, a Frank Frazetta type feel. Got these damsels in distress at the mercy of these nasty monsters. There's a lot of inner dialogue by Ash throughout this. His inner dialogue is like he's always pissed off about something that somebody did. The notes that I have here is like Ash has a real hate for the elite, and I didn't really get this from him in the movie. Okay, we'll do this. The decisive factor in great battles is always hinged on having the technological edge, the better mousetrap, the Romans' use of bronze over crude iron, the longbow and the invasion of Normandy, or was it Waterloo? How the hell am I supposed to know? I never had time to do all the studying like you rich kids did. I'm like, who the hell is he talking to?
See, on one hand, he's like belittling all the commoners and the people from this time that don't know. They didn't have the benefit of the education he got in the 20th century.
Right.
But he also hates the elites from his own time. Like everybody's against him, basically.
Right. The next dialogue box is some of us had to work for a living, stocking the shelves at the S-Mart. So they're nice and neat as you please when you kids come in to spend daddy's money. He talks about how he's going to use his injuries for workers' comp when he gets home. Like... He's going to go home and fall in the aisle at S-Mart and then get some workers' comp. And the only other note I have here is like Ash introduces steam power a little early in the timeline. Mm-hmm. So, him
got to do.
One of the coolest parts about the movie and of course the comic is, him getting this car built into this massive war machine.
Yeah.
It is so awesome. So
Death
awesome.
cart, basically.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's, he's taking all these things and putting them on this car, using this blacksmith to make this stuff, and his engineering degree, apparently. And he makes, he makes
just needs that steam plant engineering book. That's
right, dude. But one of my favorite parts of the movie, and of course, when he unveils it and he's just like, he's got the big helicopter blades on the front of that thing in the movie, and he's just sending deadites flying, or, these skeletons with their jaws dropped open, and then they're just flying through the air. What a great shot. I don't know. The vehicle itself looks a little bit more mean than what we get in the movie. I don't know if that's, it's not too far off from what we get. But,
in the movie, it's just his car with a little bit of, weaponry attached to it and stuff. This looks like a totally different vehicle.
yeah, it does. So before we get into the ending of this, what are your notes for the third issue?
That's really all I've got. I do like it's from the movie too, but like when things are looking really bad and they're getting overtaken, Ash basically shits himself and runs away. And Henry's the redheaded guy. What's the king's name? Is it Arthur?
Ooh, boy, I don't know. Arthur seemed to be on the nose.
Yeah, but the king, thinks Ash has abandoned them. And it seems like he has because he's terrified. But that's when he busts back out with the death coaster and attacks all the. But yeah, I like him playing into him being a huge coward when the chips are down and he runs away. But it was a misdirect because he comes back pretty quickly.
This happens in the movie, right? Where he punches Evil Ash's burnt face and it twists around. Does that happen? Okay. See, a lot of these beats are like, okay, I remember this. The interesting thing here, as we get into the end of this book, is that I must have heard about the end of this screenplay probably within the last 5 years, but forgot completely all about it as I was reading the book, and then realized oh, that's right. It's based on the screenplay. And as we got closer to the end, I was really anticipating the end of this comic. So you have the floor, sir. Let our listeners know how this thing ends.
Well, in the movie, like we said earlier, he gets back to his own time successfully, fights off a deadite in the future, and kind of ends as a hero. But in the script and in this book, the plan for him getting back to his own time is the wise man concocts a potion and tells Ash, you have to take 6 drops, and every drop you take will let you sleep for 100 years. So you need to sleep for 600 years. You'll awaken in your own time. Ash is this big screw up, so he ends up accidentally taking 7 drops, and he wakes up 100 years in his own future. And he walks out of the cave that he's been hiding in, that he was supposed to sleep in for this time. And London, which is where his adventure takes place, is in ruins. It's basically post-apocalyptic time, and he's like, "Oh, I slept too long," and that's how it ends. So a downer ending, which I had seen, that ending because I have the director's cut. Going through, Evil Dead, the entire series, is notorious for being one of those movies that has the record for most DVD releases because every 4 or 5 years there's a new DVD coming out or Blu-ray or whatever. So I had, I recorded all these movies off on VHS that I had rented in late in my high school years. Yeah. And then once DVD became a thing, I was all over, getting these on DVD. And the first Army of Darkness DVD I had was the director's cut version. So I had seen the alternate ending from that, and that's the one I've watched the most over the years because that's the DVD I've had. I've had a few other DVDs, but the one I've seen the most is the one with the director's cut. And watching this theatrical cut again in preparation for this, I remembered how much I like the original theatrical ending. It was way more fun, way more exciting, and I think the director's cut ending, the original ending, is more appropriate maybe for the movie. It's because Ash is always getting screwed over. Right. But the theatrical ending with him in S-Mark and Back in the Future in S-Mark fighting off a deadite, that sequence is outrageous and it's so much fun. So I like that. I like both versions basically. Okay. But yeah, this book ends with the original ending of him waking up in the future.
I did not know that it was actually filmed. I thought for some reason that this was something that they completely decided, we need to do a different ending. So they didn't film it. So there is a filming.
Yeah, you can probably find it on YouTube.
I'm gonna have to go watch it.
But I think the studio was like, no, this ending is too much of a downer. You got to, pep it up, basically.
What was the end of Evil Dead 2?
Evil Dead 2's ending is in the beginning when he does the recap, where he gets sucked into the portal.
Yeah,
he lands in the desert, and the soldiers surround him, and immediately they think that he's the chosen one, and he realizes, oh God, I'm in the past. And that's how it ends. So a similar ending really to Evil Dead 2 from what the Army of Darkness ending.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like it's very similar where, okay, well, he's not in the past, he's in the future. Oh, great. What misadventures can Ash get into now? He's in the future. That's the way I took it. And so, yeah, as I'm reading this and I'm going through the end of this, and I'm like, oh, yes, that's right. This is definitely different than what we get at the end of, because, I mean, it just snap cuts. We don't even talk about how he gets back to S-Mart. He's at S-Mart telling his story to some guy who does not believe a word he's saying. To me, I was like, Ash in the future would be great to read. And my thought was like, this is where we would pick up. Well, I wondered what the story was going to be after this. Did they even have one?
Having these DVDs for all this time, I've watched the movies with the commentary track several times, because the Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi commentary tracks are some of the best of all time. Like, especially the first Evil Dead movie, there are two tracks. There's one with just Bruce Campbell by himself, which is hilarious and a great listen. And there's one that has Rob Tapert, the producer, and Sam Raimi, which is also really good. And then on Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, the DVDs I had of those had like a bunch of different people on them. Raimi, Campbell, the producer, some of the other actors and stuff. So those are all really entertaining to listen to. And they may have referenced plans in those that I don't remember. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. I was a fan. I thought this was an awesome ending. I would have loved to have had this ending in the movie, but I understand the appeal of the other one as well. But I would have also loved Army of Darkness 2 or whatever the following thing would have been after this. Clearly what we end up with after this is Ash versus Evil Dead, right? Is there anything else that happens movie-wise for...
Well, there was the Evil Dead reboot movie from 2013. Have you seen that with Nobody Famous release, and Jane Levy is the lead, I guess, and she's, you would recognize her probably, but...
Let me tell you something. You guys explained what this movie did to you guys on the podcast. I am not going to watch that movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there is some grotesque stuff in that one. It's great. I love that movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you should at least watch the Red Band trailer. Okay.
All right. I can probably stomach that.
Yeah, it'll give you an idea of what you're in for as far as the movie itself. But yeah. And there are some people that say that movie is kind of a sequel to the other Evil Dead movies. Like it just doesn't have Ash in it, but it's the same cabin and everything.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what what Raimi and Campbell intended or not, but yeah, I even remember there was a rumor that there was a deleted scene where at the very end of the movie, the last survivor of that Evil Dead reboot was going to be walking down the road trying to get back home, and a truck was going to pull over to pick her up and help her, and it was going to be Bruce Campbell in the truck.
Okay.
Which would have been cool, but I don't think there's any truth to that. Bruce Campbell, I think, even said, we never filmed anything like that. That's just something that somebody made up and put online.
Have you watched the series, like the Ash versus Evil Dead?
Ash versus Evil Dead? Yeah, I love that show.
I think I went through the first season and a half, maybe. I might have got through the first two. There's three, right?
Yes.
Three seasons. I don't think I've watched the third one yet. But yeah,
the third season is weaker, I think, than the first two, but it's still a lot of fun. Yeah, I really like that show.
Well, we've reached the end of this, man. We have talked about Army of Darkness, the movie adaptation from Dark Horse. Lots of fun. I mean, folks, I will tell you that you're not going to get, story-wise, too much of a different experience other than the ending. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff is going to feel very familiar, but let me tell you, this book will sell me on the art easily. I understand why these issues are going for what they are, because it's a wonderful book to look at.
Most comics, it's hard to adapt a movie or a show, especially when it's stuff that depends on movement, and a movie like this, it's so dependent on cool camera work and stuff. Like, you can't really replicate that frenetic Sam Raimi style in a comic, but the art in this is so cool that it's definitely, they got the right guy for it, and it's very cool to look at. A lot of cool images, and it works really well. A couple other actually quick notes I wanted to bring up I'd forgotten about.
Yeah.
When I was looking at the fandom for this, I noticed one of the bullet points says contains a text narrative written by Kurt Busiek.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, that's weird. I wonder if he did like, I didn't know what that meant, the text narrative. I was like, oh, does that mean he's doing the dialogue box, the text boxes? Or so I went to Twitter and I asked him about it. I'll just read his quote directly.
Number one, let me just clarify. You went to Twitter and just started talking to Kurt Busiek.
Yeah, he's really good. I've talked to him on there before. He's really good about replying, and interacting with fans and stuff on there, as long as they're, cordial and stuff.
Sure. That's number one. That's awesome. And number two, I can't wait to hear what he has to say. So what did he say?
It's pretty simple. He just said, I wrote an article on the earlier movies for the first issue, and I did an interview with Bruce Campbell for issues 2 and 3. So he didn't have anything to do with the actual book, the comic book itself, but he did some ancillary stuff, I guess, for in the back matter, I guess. Yeah, and this would have been early in his comics career, I guess. So, and I know he later did an Army of Darkness versus Darkman miniseries he wrote that I have not read yet, that I'm excited to read at some point.
Wow. No shortage of Army of Darkness comics out there. I will say that much, man.
They've crossed over and I started reading the Army of Darkness books when they first started coming out in like the mid 2000s from Dynamite. Never really was a big fan of them. I've always thought, they're okay. And so I kind of lost track of them pretty early, but I really liked the Army of Darkness versus Marvel Zombies miniseries they did. I'm excited to read the Darkman and Bubba Hotep crossovers that they've done.
Oh my goodness.
Which I have not read, but I assume are probably pretty cool. The only other note I had, which is something I got from one of the commentary tracks back in the day that I just kind of remembered when we were talking about, when you mentioned that this is Army of Darkness, which is a sequel to 2 Evil Dead movies, like, why didn't they call it Evil Dead 3? And I think the reason Raimi gives is that those movies were not like big hits. They were kind of cult classics, but the studio was like, this is a Universal movie. They were like, we don't want people to think they're watching the third movie that they've never heard of the first 2. Like, that's not good. No. And he had an idea to call it the Medieval Dead at one point, and that didn't fly either. So,
I mean, that rings.
Yeah, that's a cool title. But that's pretty much all I got. Pretty cool book. I liked it. I don't know if I'll ever read it again because I know, it's pretty much the same as the movie, but I'll definitely look up those images again and admire some of the artwork, which is very cool.
Kiss, the Army of Darkness. Then you have Army of Darkness, Xena Warrior Princess.
Mm-hmm. I think they did 2 of those.
Yep. Vampirella, Army of Darkness. Let's see here. Army of Darkness, Reanimator.
Yeah, that could be cool. Yeah.
Army of Darkness, 1992.1. With Ash getting hitched and the Army of Darkness continuously at the heels of the Chosen One, it's time to party like it's 1992.1. Dynamite celebrates the success of the Army of Darkness series by going back to a simpler time when the internet was young and the cell phones were 10 pounds. This one-shot feature features stories that are classically Ash, but your favorite Army of Darkness writers, James Corrick, Steve, I recognize Corrick. Is that oh boy. Steve Niles, Elliot Serrano, and Mike. So it sounds like it's kind of like an anthology or telling different stories of what's going on, what happened with Ash. So I'm just looking to see if there's any other, what was that? Hellbellies and Deadnecks. Okay. There are a ton of these books. Army of Darkness versus Hack Slash.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Then Army of Darkness. Come on. Army of Darkness, Ash Saves Obama.
Oh, wow.
Come on. This is, of course, Dynamite.
In 2008, 2009, comics were lousy with Obama covers and Obama appearances. So
Yeah. And all right. Yeah, there's the Army of Darkness, Bubba Hotep.
I think Spider-Man started that trend, but I believe the Savage Dragon Obama cover predates that.
Oh, really?
Spider-Man one. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember there's a cover where essentially Savage Dragon endorses Obama for president on the cover.
I've heard of that.
I think that came out before even the Spider-Man one.
Nice. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is our coverage of the movie adaptation of Army of Darkness, Dark Horse's movie adaptation from 1992. Hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I know we had a good time here. So, Chris, I know that you, sir, are running all over the internet with all sorts of podcasts. So you've done quite a few here on the Unspoken Issues podcast, but where else can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BirdieMan34. I do have another podcast called Small Screeners. I do with my buddy AJ, where we look at direct-to-video and made-for-TV movies. We do those about once a month. We're on a little bit of a break right now because in October we went into overdrive and we did our regular Small Screeners episode, and we also did 5 special episodes on the slasher remakes of the 2010s. And the classics that inspired them. So Texas Chainsaw, Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street. And then we did a 5th episode where we talked about a lot of different stuff, Halloween related. So that was, we went into overdrive for spooky season. And you can find all those on the Small Screeners podcast feed.
Very good. Very good. Well, as for the Unspoken Issues podcast, I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff out there in the archive you can go and check out. As of this recording, we have an upcoming show as of this recording where Dean, Derry, and myself sat down and we talked about Punisher Euro Hit. So going back to 1992 again, 30-year anniversary of a 7-issue series that happened in the Punisher comic where Frank Castle and Microchip end up over across the pond in Europe, of course, run afoul of the Kingpin and his nefarious plans. Batrock's in this thing. We have Tarantula showing up. We've got an English version of the Punisher called Outlaw. So a lot of stuff, a lot of fun locales to talk about. Some big dude, some big bad guy named the Bear gets decapitated by a bear trap. Tune in. You do not want to miss that.
I have never read that book, but I do remember the cover. So
Speaking of Dynamite, jumped onto a comic called Garbage Pail Kids Origins. Just looked at the first issue, solo podcast, me talking about Garbage Pail Kids. I don't know. Did you ever collect Garbage Pail Kids? You know about Garbage Pail Kids?
When I was really little, they were really popular around the time I was like 7 or 8. And, my parents didn't like them, but eventually they relented and let me and my brothers get some.
Now, I don't know why that's the case. Parents were like,
they were gross.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of too. There was a real backlash, and I threw a 2-minute audio clip of
like a news report.
Yeah, Dan Rather.
I've seen some of those. Yeah,
Dan Rather's coming on there talking about how so and so's got the report about how a lot of teachers are upset, so they wouldn't allow them in the school. Yeah. But it's so funny because at the end of this 2-minute news report, Dan Rather's, this must have been right at the end of the nightly news, because Dan Rather's and that's the news, and I don't understand it, or something along those lines. He had no idea. He doesn't understand that whole Garbage Pail Kids trend. It's hilarious. Imagine Garbage Pail Kids, but give them a superhero bent.
Okay.
All right. So your classic Garbage Pail Kid, Atom Bomb. He's the guy sitting there pressing the button and his head's exploding and a mushroom cloud's coming out of it.
I think that's probably the most popular of the Garbage Pail Kids.
Number 8A was Atom Bomb up there in the top right corner, number 8A. So the book basically talks about his origin and they give him very much a Steve Rogers, Captain America kind of origin where let's just say it gets silly, but when you start the comic, dude, it looks like any Marvel comic you've ever seen. It's people walking around, they look perfectly normal, and then all of a sudden stuff goes off the rails and we start getting Garbage Pail Kids that look very much like Garbage Pail Kids. But yes, a neat little superhero bent. And I covered the first issue. Folks, tune in. If you like Garbage Pail Kids, you get to hear a little bit about my history with the Garbage Pail Kids, and you also get to hear me talk about the very first issue of that, which I will say that I'm going to read the second because I thought it was actually a pretty interesting way of making the Garbage Pail Kids universe matter. So check it out. It's from Dynamite. I'll be talking about that at some point in a couple weeks. But that's it for that. With that being said, for Chris Armstrong, I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll be catching you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Rattlechin Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.